This week on High Performance.
There goes Alex Albon around the outside. Here goes Albon once again.
I always wanted to be a racing driver. Since I was 7 years old, driving a go-kart in Formula 2, fighting in the championship.
Alexander Albon wins in Baku.
Do you mind just popping into Helmet's office? Within 24 hours, it was almost pretty much all done. And I was a Formula 1 driver. I was kind of living in this dream. You know, the questions you get, who could replace you or why are you struggling? It wasn't at the level it should be. It wasn't good enough, and there are reasons why I got dropped. I knew I've got to show every other team on the paddock that I'm a valuable asset to this team. No matter how painful it was to experience it, I still wanted it more than anything. And I could tell straight away with Yost, he believed in me. He gave me another opportunity. I want to make this team work. This is what I have. This is the only thing I have. I'm ready to fight for a championship.
Do you want to see more Formula One drivers and global sporting icons on the High Performance podcast? If so, we need your help. Hit subscribe right now and help us access even more high performers for incredible conversations like this one. Enjoy the episode. Well, Alex, thank you so much for finding time to join us.
No, thank you.
Let's begin where we always do. What is high performance?
High performance, for me, I would say high performance is performing under, purely under the pressure of what I perceive as racing, which is where I need to perform at. I find that, especially through your ups and downs, the downs are obviously clearly where it becomes most obvious where the greats become. I find that if you can perform when you're struggling, and in these moments pull yourself up. I actually did struggle with that in my career. When I had these downs, I would be down. And so I think that's where I find the performance when it gets tough.
And were you always competitive? If we sort of rewind back to your childhood, where did this need to compete come from, do you think?
I don't think I was the most competitive kid when I was young. I don't think I started off and I wanted to win, and I did win races as a kid. I was pretty okay growing up, going in karting and all this kind of thing. But I also came from a fairly privileged background. I felt like racing for me at the time was a bit more of not a fun thing, but there was no pressure to it. I didn't need it. I could still, I was still going to school and having seen my friends and all this kind of thing. But then at some point it kind of turned, and I think I had some family issues a few years on when I was about 14, 15. We like to call it, my mum went on a holiday momentarily. But that changed me. That then became...
What way?
Then firstly the financial support was gone completely, but more than anything, it was a need to perform. It wasn't a want. It was almost a survival feeling. This is what I have. This is the only thing I have. I've got to make this work. So that's where the mindset changed, and that's where the hunger and the true competitiveness came. Yeah.
So when did the seeds of becoming a racing driver get sown then?
Very young. I was like an obsessed kid when I was growing up. One of my first words were Ferrari, which I would call Rari.
Right.
So it was Ferrari and then exhausts. I loved seeing like 4 tailpipes, which were smokes. So I used to always shout out smokes or Rari. So in terms of a car feeling, I was a massive Michael Schumacher fan. I used to throw the biggest tantrums as a kid if Michael didn't win. My mom used to have a VHS of like a 2001 Formula 1 highlights review, and I knew all the races that he won that year. So as soon as I would have an off or a bad day or whatever, that was straight in playing a Michael win. So it was early on. I always wanted to be a racing driver, and my dad used to race I'll call him a semi-professional. I think he would like that.
Right, that's very, very polite.
But he was good. He was genuinely good at his job, and he raced in British touring cars. Not so much. So I kind of got into racing as he stopped. So there was a bit of a crossover there. But he was the one who, he was my engineer, my mechanic, my driver coach. That was very much a father-son thing.
And I'm really interested in this period where your mindset shifted and you sort of took this whole thing seriously. Like this it kind of really mattered. Obviously we're talking a bit in code and we won't go into the details. But your mum was jailed for a period and then, the support you had disappeared. You, I guess, had to grow up at that moment.
You do, yes. I also have 4 siblings. So in many sense, my stepdad, he looked after us, and then they were going to school. Obviously, for them it was a huge change as well. Private school, state school, going around. I know it sounds all very first world problem, but it meant a lot. The shift was huge, and so there was a feeling of just the unknown, and a big hit in the face that you got to kind of sort yourself out and take this thing seriously. So it got pretty intense, and I have to say the first year, as I started to adapt to this different, call it life, really, it didn't go that smoothly. I was straight away kicked out of the Red Bull junior team at that time, and so this struggle became a bigger struggle, and then it was getting to the point where I thought things were starting to run out. The dream was becoming over, and I'd love to have said straight away I found form and I was off, and that was what I needed to get me to click. But actually, it wasn't. It was a struggle, and it made it a bigger struggle. Mentally, it was much harder.
In what way?
Just, I think in the very beginning, it was just not having that support around me. That made a big difference. I actually think as well, at the very beginning, it was almost felt an added pressure, because it felt like even if things didn't work out, you still had something to fall back on. It was important to me, but it wasn't the only thing. And in some ways, I think when everything happened, the pressure becomes, I've got to make this work. I've got to really get a grip of this. And the results I had aren't good enough. And this is what really matters. And that just, especially when I was 14 at the time, 14, 15, that just adds more stress, more everything. And, you do become lonely as well, because at that time I kind of closed off my friend group. They were doing their thing. I left school at that time as well. And so you're kind of you're by yourself, and it's just not a good environment to be in.
So when you reflect on that period then, what would you say, if anyone would have observed you, they would have seen as a difference between when you wanted to win as opposed to when you felt you had to win?
I definitely wanted it more. I don't think necessarily it was in the right way, though. I don't think just feeling the need to win is making you perform better or change it. I actually think sometimes being a bit more relaxed, as I was kind of at the end of my karting career, I was in a very good mindset. Sounds strange to say, but I was in this kind of carefree state, and I really didn't mind about anything. And initially, when everything started to happen, you take things so seriously. Your training, your kind of your work ethic and your processes are like, I've got to do this. And so it sounds very strange to say, but actually in some ways I think it's not always the best thing. And I've actually, as time has gone on, I've kind of looped back to a kind of a middle place where if you want it to happen so badly, sometimes it just doesn't work out because you have a bad race or you have a bad thing and you kind of overreact to it. It's like, oh, this is not what it needs to be. This is not where I envisioned it, where it needs to go. And so sometimes, taking a step back.
You must have found some kind of freedom in this period though, because, you worked hard, with your dad helping at this point to find you some race seats. And, fast forward of just a few short seasons, and you're third place in the Formula One support series. So you managed to find that freedom from somewhere, didn't you? Something clicked at some point.
I started to relax a little bit.
Right.
I started to not put that intensity of pressure on myself. And it was a lot about confidence. I think I lost a lot of general confidence when I had this issue. Well, I went from karting to cars. I struggled in cars. Didn't have the feeling, didn't have the knowledge of single-seaters, as it were, to begin with. I struggled with general life confidence. I suddenly went from having a lot of friends to no friends, started to be a lot more introverted. So everything started to fall away a little bit, become a little bit more fragmented in just who I was as a person. And it just took a while to glue it back up. I think,
How did you do that then, Alex?
Truthfully, I think a lot of it is just time and being surrounded by good people. Of course, at that time as well, my stepdad at the time, he took care of me. His family came over and also took care of us, my siblings too. And when I think about it, it was just, a little bit of confidence here, a little bit of, okay, that was good. This race weekend went a little bit better than before. And I just remember there was a winter test. It was in December after quite an average season. And suddenly I was, quickest in this test. It was in Portugal. And I was like, well, okay. And honestly, from that point on, just I was quick. I don't, to be honest with you, I don't really know where it came from. And the year after, as you said, I finished third in the Constructors' Championship with a privateer team. We're a small team. Couldn't really afford to be in a top, it's called Formula Renault at the time, a top Formula Renault team. And my kind of single-seater career started to go back to how my karting career left off. I kind of had this karting career where I won European World Championships against people like Max, the drivers that you know today, Charles, whoever. And then it just came crashing down. And then I just finally started to come back up again.
So you said in your introduction, in your definition of high performance, was how you deal with those dark moments. I'm interested then in, for listeners to this, what were the top tips to get through that dip?
For one, it was not to take everything so to heart. I think if you think about these moments, I was kind of, it was very tough. And it is that feeling like everything's coming into you. And at that time, to be fair, I did have a genuine reason to feel that way. Yeah. I do think the circumstances I had were quite bad.
And who were you able to lean on? Who were you able to go to and say, this is how I'm feeling, this is my...
During that whole thing, my siblings were kind of, we became closer, we bonded closer. You kind of close your group up as well. And so I say my family. But it wasn't perfect. I don't want to say that, I transformed as a person. I still carry this very introvertedness that I had from back then. And I'm still, as a family, we are very close. But yeah, it just took time. And once I really truly believed I could get back to firstly, I was looking to get back to just where I was from karting point of view. I just wanted to be that driver that I was back then. But then until that point, it was not that clear to me Formula One was this obvious pathway that I could achieve. It was I don't think I'm a normal driver in that sense, where Formula One was this thing and that's all I thought about. That's all I wanted to be. Of course, I wanted to be a Formula One driver, but for me to believe it, after everything that I went through, I had to almost prove it to myself. I needed to see it. And I would say only until I got to Formula 2, until I got the call that I was going to be in Formula 1, did I actually realize, I'm in it.
So let's go to that moment then. You finish the Formula 2 season. George wins the title.
Yes.
Lando's the runner-up, you're third, right?
Yes. Yeah.
They both get the nod pretty early on that a Formula 1 opportunity awaits for them.
Yeah.
You didn't get the nod early on. You were sort of set to go into the Formula E electric racing series, right?
Yeah.
How did you cope with that?
So this is the thing, is I knew I was racing these guys. I was at the time I was actually second, fighting with George for the final race of the championship. But I had a disastrous last race and stalled twice. But we'll forget that bit.
You can smile about it now.
We can smile about it now, exactly. But these two were the young guns. These were the hot shots. George was a Mercedes junior driver since he was 14, 15 years old, and Lando was connected with McLaren for the, kind of the same amount of time. It didn't matter to me, seeing these guys have their chances in Formula One. I thought, good, they deserve it. They are good enough. On my side, it was a little bit like, I want that chance, but I'm also still looking to become a professional. And it sounds really silly to say, but if you actually take the amount of people that are a genuinely paid professional racing driver who can make a decent living, and I'm not talking about private jets flying, I'm talking about just above average wage, let's say, it's must be 300, I would say maximum, thinking about all the series around. So Formula E was when I got approached. Formula E is kind of the electric racing of Formula One. It's the next best thing, career-wise, to do outside of Formula One. I got approached to do Formula E, and I thought, amazing, that's great. I actually called Helmut Marko, who's the boss of the Red Bull junior program, before I signed the contract, just to say, just out of any chance, is there a seat going in F1 before I sign this Formula E contract? And he told me, no, seats are full. There's no chance. And I think at that point, I was disappointed, but I thought, okay, I did go around more than just Red Bull. I did try to make sure, I did give it every chance I did. Yeah. I had to see if there was a spot in Formula One, but I knew there wasn't. So I thought, okay, Formula E it is. And my mindset was there. So, I signed that contract maybe 3-4 months before the final race of the season in Formula 2. And then it came to the last race of the year, and Helmut Marko got me back again. So the guy who told me there's no space, he inquired about my simulator services. That's what he said. He said he got his PA to come over and speak to me and say, do you mind just popping into Helmut's office at the circuit? And we had a chat about simulator. He wanted to know, I was actually at the simulator Mercedes doing work for them. He wanted to know how much I got paid at Mercedes.
Hope you gave them a big number. I
gave him a big number. And then he said, okay, can I see it then? I was like, oh.
See, what I love about this, sorry, Alex,
right. I've just lied about the salary now.
So what did you do? You were representing yourself though as well, weren't you?
I was. At the time, I did everything myself. I had no reason to have a manager as well. Just, I was kind of scraping along, truthfully. I was racing race by race at that point. I remember in Formula 2, my team manager, on the Tuesday, he would call me up and tell me if I was able to race that week. And that was not because I paid a bill or anything like that. It was only because they didn't find a driver yet to fill the seat. So as long as that kept happening, I kept racing. And I had a very good start to my Formula 2 season, to the point where I was fighting in the championship. So they just took the risk and committed to keep me for the whole year. So that's my Formula 2 career. But yeah, moving on. Yeah, Helmut was kind of telling me about this simulator thing. Yeah. I had a really good race as well. I won we have 2 races in F2 every week. So I won the Saturday race and finished 3rd or 2nd in the Sunday race. And then he called me back to the room. And I thought, great, he's agreed to my terms on my simulator contract. And then I don't know what it is. I think it's just something he does occasionally. He was speaking about this contract the whole time. Okay, well, this is too much. Okay, sensible number. Didn't give him the contract.
Yeah,
Mercedes contract. Told him it was can't be doing that. No, it's illegal. He, as I was kind of walking out the door, he was like, "By the way, what's your position with your contract, with your Formula E contract? Can you get out?" And I did make sure, the one thing I did make sure in my Formula E contract was to have a clause in it that if I had a Formula 1 offer, I was good to go. And I said, well, that's the way it is. And he said, okay, let me get back to you. And then within 24 hours, it was almost pretty much all done. He called me literally 24 hours time, said, okay, good to go. We're going to make the press announcement in about an hour. And I was a Formula 1 driver.
Wow.
Yeah.
Excitement, fear, apprehension. What are you thinking?
Totally honest, more fear than anything else.
Okay.
More... I think maybe you see it with me. I was a very kind of not the most confident person going through. I needed this kind of feeling like I didn't feel like I was quite there yet, and had these stumbles along the way. And so when this Formula 1 opportunity came about, I thought, wow, am I ready now? A lot of the drivers, for example, like George or Lando, they did a lot of testing in old F1 cars, in previous F1 cars before they started. I was going to start my first year in Formula 1 with literally 0 days. My first day would have been Barcelona in the freezing cold, where you do a day and a half with your teammate and then go into your first race. You could imagine going to work and you've done a day and a half in a Formula 1 car before your first weekend. It was a bit... I was more anxious and felt like I've got to make the most of this situation. I haven't been dealt the best cards for this opportunity, but it's Formula 1. I've got to take it. So,
what was the fear? What were you fearful of?
Formula 1 is so cutthroat. It's your only moment, so you can't mess up. There's drivers who take a bit too long in the championship to get going. A good example is this year. You've had a driver in a team who did about 7 or 8 races and then got given the boot. So you just got to be on it. And as a rookie, you're doing so little days in a testing program. I think that was my fear. It was just, can I get up to speed quick enough? I did have that self-belief that I would be quick enough, but did I have the time to get there? That was tricky.
I'm interested, Alex, in the parallels that you said when you were going through that difficult time where you almost needed to win as opposed to wanting to.
Yes.
And it sounds like that was showing up again here. So what did you learn from that first experience to help you this time?
So when I got into Formula 1, it was slightly different because it was... it's my dream. I'm getting into a position now where dream is starting to become reality. There was this need for sure. I felt like I needed to belong, or I needed to do this and to do that to get into Formula 1. Now that was in it, it was just trying to survive a little bit to begin with.
When that happened, you'd obviously had a period where you thought, I'm going to get a drive in Formula 1.
Yes.
Was it like, I've made it, I've done it, I can relax now? Or not at all?
No, I think it was the most stressful point. The most stressful point for me was the in-between part. It was I've been announced as a Formula 1 driver, and now I've got 4 or 5 months, well, actually no, maybe less. It's about 3 months before the first test, and I can't drive the car because there is all these limited practice limitations that you have. You can't test, so you just have 3 months to think about what it must feel like to drive a Formula 1 car. And so there was this huge build-up. I remember arriving to the first test. It was, as I said, Barcelona. Nervous, of course, but excited to drive this Formula 1 car. I come out the pit lane. I do 3 corners and I spin and I put it into the gravel trap. And I remember I was like, oh God, okay. I've spun before, no big deal. But then you come in to the garage, there's like a medical car to take you in. I didn't hit the wall, just a medical car to take you back to the pit box. And there's like 20 cameras just waiting for you. And I was like, wow, this is F1.
How did you put across an air of confidence then? That the engineers in that garage are not interested that this is your first year in Formula 1. Your team bosses are not interested. Like, you have to deliver. So regardless of the fear you have inside,
what's funny is I told you I was doing Formula E, planning to do Formula E before Formula 1. So I did a test in Formula E. And I had the exact same thing happen to me. I span on the first lap that I was supposed to do. That bit wasn't my fault at the time. It was like some technical problem, but I went through it already. So I knew it happens. And actually, when I got back out on track, yeah, of course, you feel, oh shit, what's just happened there? And you wish it, you have this feeling like you want it to have a replay button. I hope this is not real. But as soon as it happened, there's this period of self-reflection. But I made sure when I went out to, just to do the normal procedures to get out. I remember my first proper run in the car. I was on the pace straight away, and I have this doubt. I do have this doubt in me. This constant, what am I good enough? Am I this or am I that? Even now. But when the helmet comes on, I don't. And that's what's really important for me. So as soon as I had that kind of moment, for example, what's going on here? God, these cameras they're just hanging around. They're not going away. Car comes back. They take the gravel out. As soon as the helmet comes back on, I'm back in business again.
Brilliant.
So,
See, this is fascinating, Alex. So it sounds that you're aware of the demands that are being placed on you in this seat. The consequences of spinning are evident with all those photographers waiting for you when you come back in.
Yeah.
But you're describing the moment you put the helmet on.
Yeah.
You're focused on your own abilities.
Yes.
So how do you quieten that voice that is nagging away with that inner doubt?
It's strange, but I think racing cars are quite unique, where we are our own person. We put our helmet on, and as soon as that helmet goes on and our earplugs go in, we're alone. It's quite an intimate sport. There's no feeling like anyone's watching you. At least I don't feel like anyone's watching me. I don't feel like my engineers, even though they're talking to me, they're not there with me. And maybe it is this feeling of being slightly introverted, but it's actually where I feel the most calm, the most focused. And it's what I've been growing up doing, since I was 7 years old, driving a car by myself, in go-karts with my dad in a farm. That's all I've really grown up to do. And it's almost like anything, I think, when you get into your bed, you feel tired. Or when maybe that's a bad analogy, but when you go into the car, that's my space. That's where I belong. So everything goes away at that point.
It went away and things went well and you represented yourself brilliantly, and then you suddenly have another change come to your career. You're no longer a Toro Rosso driver. You're one phone call from being a Red Bull driver.
It's a very odd situation where I was started to get very comfortable at Toro Rosso. Started off well, had a good first test, and then the first few races started to have some good races. Out qualify my teammate a few times. I was kind of living in this dream where the pressure every race was becoming less and less. I knew after the first race, I knew I belonged. I knew, I've got what it takes, and I do genuinely believe in myself. And then summer break comes around. Had a great start of the season, great rookie year so far. Enjoying my racing more than I ever thought I could. And then I get the same guy, Helmut Marko, calls me back to his office, this time in Austria. So that's a bit more serious.
You had no idea why?
No idea why. I thought it was to go through my residency because he was helping me move to Monaco.
Right.
And all this kind of stuff, and kind of advised me with an older Formula One driver what to do. And it was the same conversation. So he spent the whole time talking to me about this one thing. And then just as the meeting ends, he goes, "Oh, by the way, you're in the Red Bull seat. I think this is the number to speak to. This is going to be your engineer. Maybe give him a call and figure out. You can't go to the factory, right? Because it's shut down. So everything's legally or by rule, regulation, you're not allowed to speak to anyone during shutdown. But you are going to be announced in about 2 hours." And that was it. And by the way, obviously at that time, your teammates literally pretty much one of the best drivers in the world. So good luck. And that was 6 months after my first time in a Formula One car. So it was big. It was
What
big.
were the kind of emotions that you experienced in that conversation?
It was funny because it was exactly the same emotion as I had when I first got my Toro Rosso chance. It was, I've just gone through this. Literally, I've just gone through this. Am I good enough? Can I do this? What's it like to be Max's teammate? I've got 2 weeks now of nothing, just thinking about this opportunity, but I can't drive. I can't get into my happy place. I can't get my helmet on. I've got to just prolong this anxiety out. But of course, I went into it with more confidence than I did the first time. But it's these opportunities, you just have to take them, because Formula One, the way it is, it's so cutthroat. But at the same time, I thought to myself, there are so many drivers who would kill for this opportunity. Yeah. There's so many drivers who wish they could have a spot at a top team. And within 6 months, you have got that already. You're not going to reject it. And even with that, am I good enough? Of course, there's this deep inner belief that yes, I am, and you got to go for it. So I am a little bit self-conflicting in myself, but deep down, yes, of course. Let's give it a go. Let's see what I'm like. I think in hindsight, it was probably a bit too early. I definitely was not prepared enough for my first year in
what way? Team. What do you mean by that?
There's so much that goes on in Formula One. People always think it's the driving side of things, and you just got to perform in the car when it matters and all these kind of things. But truthfully, for me especially, the biggest thing to get used to was everything around of it. So once you're in that top team, the spotlight gets put on you far, far more than what it was like at Toro Rosso. The first race that I went to back, it was in Belgium. The attention around this whole seat swap was massive. And, every mistake, everything you do gets criticized. It's quite a hot seat. The seat that I was in, it's been moved around a fair bit. So that was one of the main things, to be fair to you. I felt like I did. I struggled with the media attention to begin with. I also didn't have a manager. I didn't have anyone around me. So in terms of a personal support, I had my family. But I was kind of just going about it alone. I'd go to the racetracks by myself and I had my trainer, to be fair, but it was just us two going around. But there's also this just general knowledge about racing. So when you're in junior categories, you're quick, and that gets you away from everything. There's no importance to have good feedback, to truly give direction and leadership. When I was going through Formula 3, Formula 2, you pick up the skills, you learn the science behind what does an anti-roll bar do, or why do you need to run more pitch in the car, or what does dropping a car do? All these scientific engineering terms you pick up along the way. But in Formula 1, it's firstly, the engineering level is far advanced to anything that happened in Formula 2, but also when I'm struggling with the car, what do I need to do? What do I need to do? Some settings on my steering wheel? Will that help with my performance engineer? Or do I need to do, I don't know, there's literally 30 or 40 different things you can do to solve one problem. And I had no knowledge, really. I didn't have the experience. I never went through these problems before. And I was underprepared, really. I just didn't have that general racing experience, but life experience too.
And how did you walk in there and try and bring the team around you? What did you say to your engineers, your side of the garage, to give them the confidence that this new guy that's been pitched into a team halfway through a season is going to do what Pierre Gasly, who was sort of booted out of the team after the season, wasn't able to do, who's also a great driver, by the way?
He is, yes. So mainly for me, it was quite a quiet person. So it was more just meeting my people, meeting my engineer. My engineer was also brand new to the team. So he came in only 3 or 4 months prior to when I did. So we had quite a new relationship, and there wasn't this experience on my side of the garage that, you know, in some ways it's a good thing and a bad thing, but there was no expectation in some ways. But at the same time, obviously, there was not the knowledge even on his side about Formula One. I think he came from Formula E, actually. So I tried to do most of my talking on the track, really, which I don't think was, again, the greatest thing. At the time, I was 23.
Yeah.
So I was still, quite awkward, and I didn't probably understand how to build a relationship that well, especially with 100 people. Really, realistically, 1,000 people at a factory, but 100 people at the racetrack. So I just came in, quite quiet, did my race, had a great race, but that's it. There wasn't much deeper than that.
And how soon did you begin to think, I'm struggling a little bit, I need to do something more? Did you never have a thought in that second half of that season?
So the year after, especially, was the troubled year. That's when I really started to struggle at Red Bull.
What changed then? Because you sort of think you've done the half season, great.
Yeah, it was great. It was good for a first year. Still was behind a little bit with Max, but had some really good showings. Some qualifyings went really well, and some races did too. The year after, the car changed quite a lot. It became much more tricky to drive, and I think that's especially where experience helps to get you out of these problems. I didn't really know what direction the car needed to go in. I didn't know how to drive around the problems as well, which is a big issue. And I had a driver who could drive pretty much anything. It didn't really affect him too much. So what I ended up realizing in hindsight, what I ended up going down was this feeling of what we talked about before, over-analyzing, being overcritical, kind of going a little bit more down that road. So I spent so much energy in trying to find the solution, trying to find the problem, when really I believe I should have took a step back a bit, trusted myself a bit more, not go through the data so much. I was looking at the data non-stop, having meetings non-stop, coming back to Milton Keynes at the factory, doing all of that kind of stuff, doing extra sim days, trying to find solutions for the car and all this kind of thing.
Forcing it almost.
Forcing it, exactly, and being over-analytical. So, sometimes in that sense, it just doesn't work out. And that's kind of the part where now I've, come back from that a little bit, and be a bit more relaxed.
And how much of it was the fact you were up against Max? Look, so many people have talked about the Red Bull second seat. You can give us the definitive answer of what it is like to be Max Verstappen's teammate. How do you describe it?
The first thing is, a lot of people say that car is built around him. He's kind of like the Michael Schumacher of Ferrari. He's created this team around him, but truthfully, the car is what it is. He is very quick. So what ends up happening is he has quite a unique driving style, actually. It's not that easy to get along with. Everyone has a driving style. I would say my driving style is a bit more on the smooth side. But I like a car that has a good front end, so quite sharp, quite direct. Max does too, but his level of sharp and direct is kind of it's a whole different level. It's eye-wateringly sharp. And to give people kind of maybe an explanation of what that might feel like, I don't know if you guys play computer games at all, but if you bump up the sensitivity completely to the max and you move that mouse and it's just darting across the screen everywhere, that's kind of how it feels. It becomes so sharp that it makes you a little bit tense. And so what ended up happening was, especially during my year, you start off being a little bit behind, but not by much. And then as the season goes on, Max wants this front end in the car. He wants his car to be sharper. And as it goes sharper and sharper, he goes quicker and quicker. And for you to catch up, you have to start taking a little bit more risk. You might be a couple tenths behind one session. Just try a little bit more. Okay, I've gone off. I've had a crash. So then you've got to restart. Then you've lost a little bit of confidence. It takes a little bit more time. That gap's growing a little bit. And then the next time you try and go out and, do another job, another spin or another whatever. And it just starts to snowball. And every time the car becomes sharper and sharper, you start to become more tense. And I think it's like any sport. If you start to not be in that flow state and you're having to really think about it, and every time you go into a corner, you don't know how it's going to react. You don't have that kind of, it's purely the confidence in the car.
Oh, yeah.
The flow. It doesn't work. It never works.
Hey, I really hope you're enjoying this conversation with Alex Albon. I loved picking the brains of someone as vulnerable and as open as Alex, which is so rare when you speak to elite sporting people. But there's more. When you finish this episode, you can actually hear part 2 with Alex, because he rang us a few days after we'd recorded this episode and said there were things left unsaid. He told us that he still wanted to speak in more detail about how his adversity has equipped him for future success and what he dreams of in his future. So if you want to see part 2 of this conversation with Alex, then you can download the High Performance app, and it's there right now. So as soon as you finish watching this, check out part 2.
So were you enjoying being a Red Bull driver at this point?
Not at all, no. I was struggling, I think. I was struggling with the attention around it. Of course, I deleted all my socials and I got away from the social media side of things. I think Formula One in itself is a whole different topic about, the new generation and the new fan base that comes with it. It is very different, but it was quite toxic, truthfully. And
what do you mean by that?
Just your seat's under the spotlight. If I went anywhere, if I Twitter or on Instagram or whatever, the memes that come after you, the kind of it's a very Gen Z kind of style of mocking where you become almost a laughing joke, and it's the easy go to.
Yeah.
Whenever something happens, it's always a quote of yours or a spin of yours or whatever it may be. So you get rid of it as much as you can, but Thursdays at a track, you can't. You have media day. And I think most sports might be similar to ours, but there's only 2 drivers in a team. So with marketing and with the media, you get assigned a lot of time with them. And so this, the questions you get, you're not performing. Who do you think who could replace you? Or, this driver's performing. What do you think about him? Or why are you struggling, and all these kind of things. You, as much as you ignore it, you can't. You actually can't, because on a Thursday, you figure out what everyone's been saying.
Well, I was going to ask, as a self-confessed introvert, how do you handle this then?
Not very well. So I would say to begin with, I blocked it out. I actually took a stiff arm and tried to get rid of most of it as I could. But the reality of it was it doesn't really work because of these moments where you can't ignore what's going on just because you're getting reminded of it. And it's just noise at the end of the day. And I think as I understood that it's just noise, I felt, and this sounds strange to say, the more I was self-aware about it, as long as I had my core roots and core feelings of where I'm at and the progress I'm making and the areas I'm working on, it really stopped getting to me at some point. And it's that does sound quite strange to say, but at some points I was getting, all these comments, all this noise, all these guys having the cheek to ask me this question. And then it just got to a point where it kind of plateaued, and I just started to just focus on myself. So, psychologist, working with my trainer, working on certain areas of my racing. I was quite lucky where I had a year away from the sport. So as the negativity grew and grew and grew, by the end of the year, I kind of got to this point where I was flat. I was just destroyed mentally and didn't really have much motivation. As I had the year away, this noise stopped quite quickly, and I had it was realistically about 6 or 7 months to process everything and to go back in and to fix it.
What was the support network like for a 23-year-old suddenly under the glare of the spotlight, possibly having, some mental health challenges and needing to speak to a psychologist? Let's talk about it in the truth for what it was. What help was there from the team to understand your position?
It's a tricky position because I think Red Bull especially, they have one extremely quick driver, but they're not that used to having young drivers in their team. So, there was help and there was advice when needed, but it's not that obvious actually. And so, I was with my trainer. We kind of looked at sports psychologists just to see if I need to get that confidence back and that inner belief back. But it's very small, and I think people don't realize that Formula One, as much as it is a team sport, it's still very individual. You have the team, and the team do care about you, and they do want the best for you. But it's a strange sport where you have your little circle. It's a team within a team, and you have your little support network, which for me is my family, and at the time my trainer, and that was it. It was us three, let's say. But I realized in time that wasn't big enough, and actually, I didn't have a manager at the time, or even anyone to kind of handle, the social side of things. Yeah. So I went quiet on everything. It's really tough. It's really tough when you don't perform.
What was the toughest moment when you look back on that season?
It's obvious to say the moment when I got told I wasn't in the team anymore, but I kind of expected it at the time, so it wasn't the biggest disappointment. There was not one moment that stood out, but I think it was just it was a repetition of not clicking, and every time you're putting so much energy to try to find a solution. You're working hard to try and find a...
This is the weekend. This is when it goes right. Yeah,
exactly. Or we did this on the simulator, and that made me feel a bit more confident in the car. This is going to be the thing that gets me going. This is the thing that's going to work. You go out to the weekend, doesn't do anything, doesn't work. So you end up just getting, I guess, in some ways defeated.
You used a phrase, Alex, around that time when you said that I was destroyed.
Yeah.
Which is quite a dramatic phrase. And I'm interested in what that looked like to you. But more interestingly, what was the steps that you took to rebuild yourself?
So I realized, when that year finished, mentally I had no more energy left. I think the thing which also played a big part was trying to act like nothing, like you weren't being affected by it, and putting that smile on the camera's face, or walking into the paddock with a smile on your face. All of that stuff eventually kind of tore me down, and so as I had my year away, my first feeling was there was two areas I needed to work on. It was first, I felt like I was too much of a yes man at Red Bull, so I was too eager to impress and to please. So I would always say yes to a lot of things, whether it was marketing duties or time in the simulator, or Alex, we think you need to do this interview. I think it would be good for you, or whatever. So I was always prioritizing the team first. And I realized my energy, my mental energy was not, I was far too drained even before I got into the car to begin with. And the second thing was just pure performance. where were my weaknesses to Max? What areas of the car? Why was he able to drive these style of cars? Why could he drive it like this way? What areas in race management did I struggle with compared to him? And this kind of stuff. And so I kind of created almost these two areas, these two sides. They're kind of the racing side and the non-racing side, let's say. But of course, it's all in one. And I just went around to it, and I kind of sat down with my trainer, got myself a manager, got myself a social person, got myself a psychologist. I think honestly that was most of it. Got myself like an accountant, the very basic stuff. What's very strange, just quickly touching it, is I was fast tracked so quickly into F1. I never created a structure. It was all just, these are your house keys, this is where you're staying, this is your bank account, by the way, and blah, 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 blah. And so I actually had, firstly, the first 2 months was actually, okay, let me sort all this stuff out, because I need to actually live and figure out where my money's going, what am I doing, kind of thing. But get the network going. So I had a true team, and I chose people that were maybe not the most experienced in their role, but would fight me to the death. And these are the same people that I have with me to this day. People who wanted an opportunity, but cared for me. So I took a guy from Red Bull who always fought my corner, no matter how tough the situation was. He became my manager, and then my trainer, who's obviously been with me from the very beginning. So I created my network, and then on the other side of things was the driving stuff, which was actually very tough to do because I couldn't drive the car due to just not having a seat. So I did a lot of work at the simulator, which made me understand things a little bit better. So I'll give you an example. Qualifying, I often realized I made a mistake a corner, maybe in most qualifying laps that I did. I kind of traced it down to why was I doing that? And a lot of the time it was because I was tense, because I was looking at the delta. We have like a live delta on the lap. And so I got to a position now where I never drive with the delta. So I doesn't matter if it's qualifying or race. I never know what lap time I'm going to be doing. I don't know if it's quicker or slower than my other lap or whatever it may be. And that's so that you're just driving to be quick. You're not driving. What often happens is you'll make a mistake in a lap. You'll see that you're going slower than your previous qualifying lap. And then the next corner, you're trying to make it up.
Yeah.
And then you make a mistake, and then it goes worse. And so it opened me up to be more free and more less tense, but just be really in the moment, be in the present. And so just little things like this, like in terms of race pace and managing tires. What did I notice? The team were very good about it on the simulator. They would show me Max's data from my data from the previous year, and I'd still speak with my engineer at the time. He was working at the simulator and just working out little things like that.
It's a good reminder for a lot of people that sometimes the toughest thing you can go through can actually be a really valuable thing for you, and you needed this time to.
I did.
Become a sort of fully fledged F1 driver, if you like.
I felt like the best thing that happened to me was having pure time away from the sport.
Yeah.
Because you're in the washing machine, you race after race, and to actually get a moment of time to self-reflect, because you really didn't have that much time to self-reflect. It was the best thing.
Well, I was going to jump in and ask you about the people-pleasing bit then.
Yes.
How did you learn to set boundaries and protect your time?
I was just saying, like with marketing, like I'm kind of ruthless now in some ways. I've definitely changed a lot my approach to putting myself first. The reason why I do it is simple, is because I need to care about myself more than other people. It's that selfishness, and I realize there's a balance between being there for the team and being someone that the team want to work for because of how good they are, but also just outright, I'm the one driving that car. I need to be in the best position possible. So the way I got about doing it was purely my understanding of knowing what I need to be the best. And it's honestly just that simple. Okay, what does it take? And how do I get myself to be the best driver I can be? That's going to put me in the best position. I do that.
The one key moment really that we've skip past is the moment that you get told you're leaving Red Bull.
Yes.
After all the things you've explained, and like honestly, it's the first time I've ever really heard a Formula One driver say like, this is how hard it can be in the public glare when everyone assumes your life's incredible because you're an F1 driver. Actually, the sort of mental challenges that you're having to go through. Was there any part of you at that point that almost felt like a bit of a sense of relief that this was over or not?
It's weird. It's like this. No matter how painful it was to experience it, I still wanted it more than anything. And so when I got told the news,
how did they do it?
Christian just went to the office. He told me, I used to live about 5 minutes from the factory, so it wasn't that bad.
What did he say?
I kind of knew it was coming. Saw it in the media a little bit beforehand, but said, there is this situation that's brewing. Obviously, and I do genuinely believe this with Christian and Helmut. They really wanted it to work. They didn't. The reason why it was told so late was because they gave me till the last race to try and show my worth. So for that, I genuinely do believe they wanted the best for me. But it just didn't work out. And obviously Sergio is gonna take your place, and we'll keep you as a simulator driver if you accept. And we'll try to find you a place for the year after. And so that was it, really. Of course, I remember the walk back to my car. I remember, obviously, had a few moments by myself afterwards. It was tough, but I thought I would have felt the relief, but all I wanted was to get back again. I think it's that kind of psychotic kind of just need. And so people, often say, how long did it take you to get back into it? But within a week, I was back in the simulator again, preparing their car for next year, the year that I wasn't going to be in. So, it doesn't take much.
So, how's that then? Because you don't get into Formula One without an ego, right? You don't. It just isn't possible.
Yes.
What was your ego saying to you when you're basically making the car faster for the two race drivers, working hard on the sim, doing everything behind the scenes?
It was the weirdest kind of yin and yang, like everything pulling away from each other, because I knew the best thing I can do for myself is to do the best job for the guys. I have to commit myself more than I ever have done before, and I've got to raise my stock. I've got to show not just the team, Red Bull, but I've got to show every other team on the paddock that I'm a valuable asset to this team. Because realistically, there's not going to be likely a seat at Red Bull or at AlphaTauri, but there likely would be a seat somewhere else. So how can I create that feeling? And the best job I could do is to make this car as quick as it can go. And there were some issues on the gear I drove. This feeling that I had about the car, they were genuine. It wasn't me just saying it, but we fixed a lot of these issues. And I remember in the first test, when Checo and Max were driving the car, it was in Bahrain, and Max, who obviously drove the year I drove with him's car, he said, the car's transformed. It's so stable now. This is exactly what I needed in the car. That's what I wanted in the car. And I thought to myself, oh, God, if only. And it was just that feeling. I was at a racetrack. I was at every single race pretty much that year, supporting the guys and helping Checo get comfortable with the car. I was driver coaching Yuki Tsunoda, another one of the junior drivers, or the one in Toro Rosso or AlphaTauri at the time, helping him get up to speed. And it was this weird thing because, for example, with Yuki, I wanted to take his seat. He was a potential candidate that I could replace. But I remember having that chat with Helmut Marko. He told me at the time, you need to driver coach this guy, and I was like, I'm not going to. That's a potential seat. He said, no, he's already signed. Like he's guaranteed. So I was like, okay, fine. Then I'll help him. But
Brutal.
It was a very weird dynamic because I was having to be selfless, and it didn't really agree with me that much. I was doing my job, but it worked out, and it was the right thing to do in the end.
And how did you maintain your energy? Because you said in the season before, it started to drain you, where you had to go in and put a smile on your face and be enthusiastic, even though it was tough.
It was so easy. I think I often get asked, how was it being on the sidelines and doing all this stuff? And when you want something, you don't have to work for it. The desire and the motivation to get back into F1 was so high that, of course, I didn't. In some ways, it was pulling me this feeling of not being in a car but helping other people. But the ambition to be back in a Formula One car was so high that my energy levels were sky high. I was.
How did you quell that fear that Formula One moves on quickly? At that moment, you're yesterday's guy. You're the failed Red Bull driver.
Yeah.
You need to rewrite this story pretty quickly.
It is, and it's exactly that. It's how do I position myself, especially when I'm not driving a car, so I can't show people in the moment that I'm.
And did you feel you hadn't actually had a fair crack?
I felt like I had a fair crack. I just felt that already by that point in the year, I wish I knew the stuff I knew now already just 7 months ago. I wish I got given that. I wish I had that knowledge now. I was convinced that, I remember, Checo was actually struggling at the start of the year quite heavily. So I knew it wasn't just me. It kind of helped me a little bit get over, it's not, I'm not the only one with this kind of feeling that the car's feeling the way it does and all this kind of stuff. So it was a bit of self-affirmation, but also, just a bit of experience without actually having the experience. It was simulator experience, but it was still genuine experience, and just going through and that kind of self-reflection, as we said. So by 6 months into the season, it was very clear to me. I had a plan A, plan B, plan C. Plan A was obviously F1, which was sky high as priority, and then plan B, plan C was IndyCar, I think, and Formula E again. But the time was kind of getting a bit too long. I was saying, okay, well, it doesn't look like there's many seats moving. Doesn't look like there's much opportunity. And I was like, and I started to go to America to look at some possible seats at IndyCar. But,
so what did you do to get to generate interest in Formula One?
So I kind of did something. I think everyone would do it in the same way as me. I basically got statistics. I did my research on Pierre Gasly, who I replaced, myself in the team, and then Sergio at the time, or currently in the seat. And it was very simple statistics, but it was basically, it was all relative. Most of it was relative to Max. So speed, qualifying, race. I forget now. There was a few. There was quite a lot. It was more than maybe 10.
Like on a printed out piece of paper with a load of numbers
like an Excel
and
sheet. Exactly,
really?
Like an Excel sheet.
To show that you were quicker.
To show people. Yeah, I said, well, people think the problem I had really was during the year that I struggled at. Max was qualifying third or fourth, sometimes even fifth, finishing races generally third or fourth. So then I would be maybe 3-4 tenths off him in some races. That would put me 12th, 11th, and they were disastrous. But the year after, I feel shy or awkward to say this, but the car was first or second almost every race. Lewis and Max were fighting for the title, and Checo was fourth or third or fifth. But the gap between Max was actually, in most cases, bigger than it was when I was Max's teammate. And so I had this I was like, well, he's not having he's a replacement to me. But people shouldn't discredit, as much of a bad year as it was, I was still, in reflection, better than the two previous teammates. The teammate he has currently and the teammate he had before me. But I had this statistic and I didn't really know what to do with it, and basically gave it to a couple of team bosses and and started like that.
And what was the conversation you had with them? Because you used the phrase again when we were talking at the start about how so when you spoke about the recent Grand Prix in Qatar, you told yourself a story.
Yeah.
So you're now rewriting a story about your role in Red Bull. So what was the story you told these team bosses?
Well, I showed them my input and what I helped bring the team at Red Bull through all my simulator work that I did before. A lot of these teams also knew my previous history, so they knew what I was capable of in Formula 3, Formula 2. I think at the time, which also helped me, was I did all my talkings with the teams by myself. So not having my manager. I did have a manager at the time, but I didn't want him to be the front person. I wanted to do it face to face.
Great.
Which for me is much more, intimate, and they really get to know you as a person. I know I was fighting for seats, the 2 seats that I was trying to go for. They had managers doing all their negotiations for them, and you win for every time doing it yourself. These team principals, they do enjoy having them conversations with the drivers. They want, just like you want to, they want to speak to you as well.
Personal relationships, man.
Personal relationships.
Nothing beats them.
Exactly. And so that was my plan, really. Got to know Jost Capito, who was the Williams team principal at the time, well. Had a few, which did help me a lot. George Russell, who then was about to move to Mercedes, he helped me out a little bit as well, putting in a good word for me. He was very good. And that was it, really. It was quite a nice transition, and I could tell straight away with Jost. He was very open, very warm, and he believed in me. I'm convinced he most probably already had a statistic. Most teams do, actually. I think people don't know this, but they have loads of analysis on all the drivers that we don't even realize ourselves. They must probably know our strengths and weaknesses that we don't even know about. But just me, giving him that paper and showing him what I could do, and he gave me another opportunity.
So tell us about that meeting with Joss, and so tell us about that first meeting when you go in. What do you say?
Well, firstly, we didn't do it in the paddock because we didn't want the attention. So we kind of hid around the corner somewhere to have a chat. He obviously told me, I already knew this, but acted like I didn't know it, that George was leaving to Mercedes. And that was it. It wasn't anything other than just to get to know him and for him to get to know what I was like as a person. They actually got me in the simulator as well at some point during the year, more towards the end, just before I signed my contract, just to see how I was on the simulator. They also quite surprised thinking about it now in reflection that they trusted me quite quickly.
Well, the trust is well placed. We're sitting having this conversation and you're being spoken about now once again up and down the paddock, all kinds of big teams talking about Alex Albon. But the truth is, you look totally at home in this team.
Yes.
So are you now driving with the very thing that you didn't have at your disposal at Red Bull, which is the freedom?
Yes. It all comes down to, as we talked about my struggles and where I was and feeling tense and not having this platform or this structure around me to protect myself, but also the experience. I feel like now I'm in this place where I say, firstly, I'm self-aware. I know how fake and how silly social media can be. I don't take it to heart. It's very much a job for me. I have someone I employ who does all that for me, and I don't need to look at it or get involved in it.
Just on that point, would you mind just sharing with us, like for people that put those memes out or those comments or think it's just a bit of fun?
Yeah.
Could you just explain what it really does do to someone?
I understand it in a way because it's a bit of fun and it's funny sells. It gets views, but at the same time, I've seen it through myself, but I've also seen it with my teammates more than anything. And it's weird. Like, I get it, but I don't get it. I feel almost old in the way that I look at things, but I look at it like I only enjoy looking at posts where they're talking well about something, or they're congratulating or being inspired by something. And when it's like making fun of, like, it just gets me going the wrong way. I just find it not funny, but I think it's because I've gone through it on a different
But
side.
people that say, well, it's only a funny thing, how do you let it affect you?
I think it's that thing of just teasing it. At the end of the day, you're just a human. I think we're very vulnerable people, very vulnerable athletes, being young in a sport that's so much in the spotlight. And it should just be seen like that. We're as vulnerable as you. And you wouldn't make a meme out of your mom or your sisters or your brother, right? And the same applies to anyone. And I think I look at it more in the lens of you treat everyone almost like you would see them face to face, that you know them. It's very simple, but that's all.
Sorry to, and you were talking about the freedom you have here now. No social media.
No social media. I feel like I've got a very good team around me. The team is a core team now. It's maybe 4 of us at this point, but they protect my best interests to heart. Like right now, for example, it's very hard for the team to get access to free time of mine, or spending. They want to come and see me in Monaco and film a piece with me or whatever. They're laughing behind here, but it's true that I've got a good group around, and the other thing is purely the wealth of knowledge that you get. It sounds silly to say because I've only been in Formula 1 for 4 years now, but I know what the car needs in terms of an engineer. I think I don't want to sound silly saying this or arrogant saying this, but I do think I could engineer a car to a decent level by myself if I needed to. I wouldn't get everything right. Definitely check how much fuel's in the car. But in terms of like a general scientific point of view, I understand it. And the final thing, which is the biggest thing, is I'm not tense. I'm at one with the car. I know what the car's going to do before I go into the corner. I think there's a huge thing about racing, which is you've got to feel connected and it can't feel forced. Just like walking. I think it's hard to imagine, but a car can feel the same as walking to a racing driver. You can drive a car and not have any thought to it, and to be on the limit and to be able to know exactly, if I turn in like this and I want this, you just know.
Yeah.
You know how the car needs to feel into the corner before you go into it. And I have that feeling. It didn't happen straight away. It didn't happen for first weekends in Williams, but I was experienced enough to create a car that made me feel at one with the car. So yeah.
Nice. You've been more than generous with your time. So we're going to move on to the quick-fire questions.
Okay.
Before we do you now feel that, with all due respect to Williams, if a Ferrari, Mercedes, Red Bull rang you again, you could go to a team fighting for wins tomorrow and drive with freedom?
Yes, I do. I have the inner self-confidence. It's taken a long time to get there. I don't think I'm one of these drivers who've had it from the very beginning, but I do. I've often thought, that I feel in some ways like I owe the team for what they've given me as a chance to get back into F1. But at the same time, I know I've given them back just as much as what they've given me. If that sounds a little bit arrogant to say.
That's all.
I want to make this team work. I really do believe that. I enjoy working at this team. I enjoy this family feel that this team has. I enjoy seeing what James Vowles can do and how he's putting this team. Weirdly, I'm getting old. In the world of Formula One, I'm 27, and I feel like I'm near my peak. As in, you can have your peak for a long time, but I'm getting to a point where I feel like my experience and my speed is in a good place, and I'm ready. I'm ready to win races, to fight for a championship. I would love it to be at this team, but who knows? I've got to keep my doors open because that's just how it is. Just like teams keep their doors open for other drivers, you've got to keep your doors open for other teams. So yeah.
There you go. That's a man talking who has been brutally taught the lessons of how cutthroat Formula One can be. Right, the quickfire questions, Alex. The first one is the 3 non-negotiable behaviours that you and the people around you should buy into.
I want people to tell me the truth. So I know it sounds simple, but I do need people to see behind. My lens is quite thick, and I only see things through a racing driver's point of view. It sounds, again, very boring, but the respect. Respect is very important to me. It's who I am. I just love people who have that grit between their teeth, that pure determination. It's in everyone who's around me. That kind of do or die. I love that.
Nice. What's your biggest strength and your greatest weakness?
My biggest strength is I'm self-aware, but my biggest weakness is I'm self-aware. Truthfully, I think you can hear it when I talk, and I know that. I know that I'm not like most people. I know that I'm not like most athletes, most winners.
What do you mean by that?
Walking around with their shoulders back, with that self-confidence that there's no other person who can beat me, or this mentality or that mentality that's for losers, or whatever it may be. I know the way I've gone through my business and the way that I've got to Formula One. I've gone through struggles. I've had moments where you can be totally honest. It wasn't at the level it should be. It wasn't good enough, and there are reasons why I got dropped or why I had these setbacks. So, there is that. But the way I see it is I don't see why you can't build on these things. I feel like I've got the natural talent, but I'm still improving. I've still got this. I've got time. I've got time to be the best person ever, as it were. Sounds a bit corny, but there you go.
I like it. What advice would you give to a young Alex just starting out?
And it's still to older Alex as well. It still applies, but it's it's that inner confidence. I wish I had it more, and it's one of them ones where you can't really just tell someone to be more confident, can you? It's one of them ones where you've got to really build into it. So younger Alex would be a bit more. It's not telling them fake things and and overly supportive and not being straight with them, but yeah, I think it's that. Just believe in yourself more, because you definitely had it this whole time.
If you could go back to one moment of your life, what would it be and why?
Well, in a perfect world, it would be back in my first year in Formula One. I would never have gone. Is this as in not to change it, but just to live it?
Yeah.
Just to live it. Oh,
or to change it.
To change it.
Whatever comes to your mind.
I was thinking about, the moments like with my mom and everything like that. But they're definitely not moments I would like to relive.
What do you mean by that?
Just I think it's made me stronger for these moments itself. But I wouldn't necessarily relive it just for the sake of reliving it. I think I've learned it. I wouldn't have done much differently because I felt like the learning process has been all part of the journey. And it's the same thing with my time in F1. I'd rather have had a tough year and learnt from that, and that year that we talked about where I had that year away, that's been invaluable to me, and I'll carry that, and I'm a better driver for it. The only time I would relive something is then to enjoy it in some ways, because it's the moments where I wouldn't be just emotionally to live it again. So my first podium was very special. Actually, no, my first race in F1. I was too nervous to enjoy it. I was, I remember on the start lights, we have a hand clutch, and my hand was shaking so much. I just thought, if I drop this, I don't know where it's going to go, but I hope I get off the line. So it would be my first time in Formula One. Relive it and enjoy that moment a bit more.
And finally, your one golden rule ready to living a high performance life with all of the things you've learned, your highs and lows, the stuff you've gone through. What is now your one golden rule for living a high performance life?
Not to take everything too seriously. Enjoy the moment as much as you can. That's 2 rules. But how do I say it? Don't become so emotionally attached to it.
Yeah. And look, you may well have had to learn that the hard way, but it's a great reminder in life that these difficult moments, we sometimes think it's a full stop, right?
Exactly.
The truth is it's a comma.
Exactly.
And thank you so much for, being so honest about the challenges you went through when, your mum had the issue that she had, and then the subsequent issues you faced being dropped at 16, and the same thing happening in Formula One. I just think it's a really strong lesson this for people listening who are going through a hard time maybe at the moment and think that this is the very end. It's a reminder that just because something is hard for you doesn't mean it's necessarily bad for you.
Precisely. I think there's always that light at the end of the tunnel. My experience has taught me that you always come out better the other side. I've had that happen numerous times now. And it makes me positive when I go through these downwards moments, because I know I'm going to become better of it in some weird way.
Thanks for so much honesty and so much time.
No problem. Thank you, guys.
Mate, really enjoyed that.